Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Property Doctor podcast with me, your host, Dr Andrew Threadgold. This week, I'm delighted to be interviewing someone that I've guested on his podcast in the past, but it's time to return the favour because I've got a funny feeling that this chap's going to have quite a bit of an interesting tale to tell. So, ladies and gentlemen, for your listening pleasure and viewing if you're on YouTube, please welcome Dr Andrew Egwim.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me on your podcast. It's a privilege. I've had you on my podcast. It's still one of our favorite, most popular shows. So, I was delighted when you asked me to come on.
We had a real good chat, didn't we, that day?
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got quite a lot of stuff that resonates between us in terms of our, not necessarily our careers, well, maybe a little bit, but also our outlook on life and the financial markets and things, which I'm sure we'll come on to later.
Exactly. That's the thing about podcast, you see. Short form is great and it's good for capturing attention. But when people go for long form, I've always been into long form, like a blog, a newsletter, podcast, and that has been much of what we do on my channel. We find that those who are ready to listen to that, go along the same journey with you, often have a bit of the same orientation and the same sort of like thinking compared to a million views for 1 minute, 50 seconds, me jumping off the roof and doing something fancy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we were talking before we started, I know who you are. We've obviously spoken at length before, but it was all about me.
Yeah.
But we had such an engaging conversation, so I wanted to get to know you. And so, obviously, with your name, I'm aware that you must be from a Nigerian background. So how did you end up in the UK? What tell me about your career? Did you train in Nigeria and then come over? What happened?
I mean, it's 9 years now in the UK. Well, almost 9 years by September, and I'm still wondering how I ended up in the UK.
Or why?
Well, to be honest, it's been a fantastic ride, and part of the journey didn't look like it. I originally trained as a doctor in Nigeria, so finished 2010. I went to UNN, which is University of Nigeria Medical School. Mm-hmm. But right from medical school, I've always had this entrepreneurial streak. Like started businesses one in school and sort of made and gave out money and did quite a few things. Started investing just at the beginning or towards the beginning of medical school. So by the time I was finishing medical school, I had a general idea of what I wanted to do and what direction I wanted to go. So I didn't quite plunge directly into postgraduate training, even though I got an offer to do radiology residency.
Right.
I left that to run my business and do a bit of work with an NGO. So HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, NGO, which was really fun, very fulfilling, very diverse job. You could be wearing a suit or, a very nice traditional attire in the morning, speaking with high-level government officials, and in the evening you were sort of like in the streets or in a village trying to do stuff. So towards my second year there, I decided to go and do a master's. Or rather, I got an offer for a scholarship to do a master's, and that was in the UK, Nottingham University. Shout out to Nottingham University.
Big shout out to Nottingham.
I couldn't say no. They offered me a full tuition. They call that Developing Solutions Scholarship for Developing Leaders.
Right.
So the idea was I'll do a 1 year master's. Go back. I already had a farm. I had a business farm. I had a stock portfolio. I had like a clothing business. I had a few things. And I had a very thriving blog. There was no plan to sort of like stay back in the UK, but something happened after my first year here. I had all the people I looked up to encouraging me, why don't you stay back? Maybe you might even like to go back to clinical medicine, because by then I've been out of clinical medicine for 4 years.
Wow.
And if you don't like it, you can always come back. And then I thought, why don't I give it a go? And so I started working in medicine. I applied for a job. My first job accepted me, which was a bit unusual now, but back then, 2017, that was in Nottingham area, that was in Mansfield.
Yeah.
And I started, and I'm here today.
Wow. So even by that point, you had accessory income streams.
Yes, that's something I'd always been interested in. Well, I'll not say always. I'll say it's about 18, 19 that I seem to have eaten the fruits that opened my eyes to all that stuff. Because I was
Mm.
born in I was born in a family where, let's say, both parents were university educated and
Right.
all
Okay.
uncles and aunts are university educated, but were financially very unstable. I
Mm.
mean, it was always in debt and borrowing and all that stuff, including my first year medical school fees. And I knew that my parents are fantastic parents. They're great. I wouldn't wish for any better parents in the world.
Mm.
But I just knew that when it came to finances, I needed to follow a different script. But there was no way to know that there was an alternative. It's like someone handed me a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This was 18 years, 19 years. It sort of like blew my brain. And I said, oh, wow, that must have been what I've been looking for because I was already going to go to med school. I was school captain, that's head boy, we called it back then.
Yeah.
And, you're sort of like top of your class. And you just knew that, well, I know two other people who were like doctors, university graduates, and they didn't seem to be, I mean, financially free or time free.
Mm.
So I knew there must be something different. And that's how I ended up starting to look at the stock market and businesses and all of that. And
Mm.
I
Very
would
good.
say that I have no regrets.
No, I'm sure. So you mentioned that you had a thriving blog. Was that back in Nigeria that your blog was thriving?
Yeah, so I started blogging in 2008. I
Right. Okay.
found my very first blog is very embarrassing to look at, but I've left it there as an archive. It was just a random affiliate marketing blog about weight loss for idiots or something like
Really?
that.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's easy for a 21-year-old to try to tell people how to have a six pack because
Yeah.
try when you're 40.
I've tried it. It
You've
doesn't
tried it.
work.
Well, you don't seem to be doing too bad. I'm coming very close to 40, so maybe I should write another version. But that blog was sort of like it opened my eyes to things like search engine optimization, how to write copy, affiliate marketing, and sort of like partnership. Maybe I'm going to write a guest article for your blog. There used to be an e-zine articles then back then where
Mm-hmm.
people could post stuff. Yeah, so that was where I started. Then I had other blogs along the line. I had newdimensionlife.com, which was just me rambling and all that stuff. But it opened sort of like an avenue. While the blog wasn't generating a massive income, it sort of like started to get me sort of opportunities. And one
Mm.
of them was sort of like speaking in events and conferences. And speaking events and conferences like massive undergraduate business conferences where people say things like, "Oh, I really love your suit. How did you get this suit?" And I'm like, "Oh, this didn't cost me." They think it's a designer suit, and I was able to set up a business just based on that.
Right.
So sort of a clothing line was called New Dimension Couture. So
Right. Right.
ND, New Dimension.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, like in campus, I mean, I say this to undergraduates, it's a very good opportunity to test businesses, launch it from your dormitory room. And it took off. We started at some time supplying 15, 16 seats. If there was an induction ceremony, we just made deals with tailors. Obviously, you had to sort of like follow up with stuff, get
Yeah.
like dressing up someone for their graduation ceremony or events, and sort of those were like little beginnings. And before you knew it, I had like income streams. I think along the line, I launched the website that was what was the name again? SMS Web or something like that
Okay.
.com,
Right.
which was basically something that fell out from me trying to find a tool to send SMS for our marketing campaigns.
Mm.
So we launched one. Obviously, didn't have the capital at that point, even though I had some cash flow, but it was going into paying for my fees, giving me some extra money to be able to live well without having to try to learn how to cook or do anything. Yeah, so we learned that instantwebsms.com for based on our use. Then we found out there were other people who needed to send broad messages, just like you have Mailchimp or the rest of them
Correct. Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of people to put up money for 25% of the equity in the business. And
Uh-huh.
this I was 22 then.
Wow.
And within a year, we were able to buy back the equity. So those were sort of like really, really the beginning times. And I was constantly having to make this decision. Do I stay in med school, and I really at some point really tried to drop out, and I still appreciate my roommate back then, who's now a surgical registrar in the UK, who kept saying, "Why don't you finish? And you might enjoy it." And to be honest, I really love working as a doctor as long as it's on my terms. If I can come and go, yeah. So these are sort of like memories that you've taken me back to those memory lanes.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds like, I mean, back then, I mean, you make it sound simple, but I started this thing, and before you know it, I had an income stream. But it's not that simple. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of effort, a lot of unpaid time that goes into these things.
I wish it was simple, but it was low risk for me, because now I'm in my late 30s and I've got a family. I've got a mortgage, but back then I was in my early 20s. I had a bit of money in the stock market, not very much, but I could do fundamental analysis, read 10Ks. You've been in that market, so you understand the amount of volume of work that goes into it. I had to give up. I may not be able to attend all the parties. I wasn't very much, like the highest social butterfly, even though I won awards as most likely to make headlines and all that. But also, I knew that if the business didn't work out, if it failed, I wasn't going to be homeless. I didn't have a home in the first place. I live in the campus. So that's why I think it might be a bit harder for someone who has bills and family. But I also didn't have much to lose, and I was willing to try new things. The internet was like this new thing, and people kept saying, "Do people really make money from the internet? It sounds like a scam." And I was like, "Let's find out."
Yeah. There's a great book. I think you may have read it, called "How to Get Rich" by Felix Dennis.
I'm going to confess now.
Oh, you've not read it?
No, I'm reading it for the third time.
Oh, okay.
At the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's too brutal. I think it's too brutal for most people because it's true. A lot of things inside there are sort of like unvarnished truths. Like it makes you really think, do I really want this?
But it should do. It is the unvarnished truth, just like you say. But one thing in there is that he says, I've read it twice or three times. I can't remember, but I love it. It's one of my favorite.
I'm not surprised.
It is one of my all-time favorite books. But he says in there, never let anything as trivial as money or the worry of not having any money stop you from trying something, because money comes and goes, doesn't it? So
fair enough.
Yeah.
The good thing about that book is because he's not just a wealthy guy telling his story. He's actually a good writer. He's a poet, and he knows how to string words together.
And he's very funny as well.
He's very funny. He's unapologetic, and he's not trying to sell a mastermind. I've got nothing against people selling masterminds, but he's already made his money from publishing and all that. Yeah. I wish I was able to meet him. He's now late, Felix Dennis, but I heard about him for the first time from My First Million.
Right.
I don't know if you know that podcast, My First Million.
I've heard of it. I've never listened to it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting podcast, but a lot of people there are from maybe Silicon Valley and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so I heard about it, and I thought, he's a British guy, and I went to look him up, and I saw he was very legit. And when I saw his photo on the internet, he looked exactly what I thought he would look like.
Right.
Like, doesn't kill a care in the world.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, anybody that's wanting to think about self-development or personal growth or being financially successful, after you've listened to this podcast, go and download a copy of Felix Dennis' How to Get Rich, either on Audible or the physical text, because it's fabulous.
I'll suggest Audible, because then you might get the richness of the flavor and the way he says words and stuff like that.
Yeah, I really like it on Audible. It's some books work really well on Audible, and another one that works phenomenally well is called Green Lights, which is Matthew McConaughey, the Hollywood actor.
Oh, right.
It's his story, his biography, and there's a lot of personal growth and self-development in that as well. But he's the narrator, and it's very, very good.
I think I'm going to get that one. I haven't read it yet, but Martin McConaughey, he's a very funny guy. He says words in a certain way, so I'd rather hear him rather than read him and see what he says.
It wouldn't work if you were to read the book the way it does by listening to it. The performance is out of this world on Audible.
And is this self narrated?
Yeah.
Did he narrate it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it is really good. So there's a recommendation for you. So coming back to you.
Yeah.
After you'd done your back to clinical practice in Nottingham, I think you did specialty training and you're a GP, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So when I came to the UK, I had to make a quick decision. Part of it is that if you're an immigrant, you needed a visa to stay in the UK. So you need a job. You can't just
your ILR, don't you?
Yeah, you know all about that.
Yeah, I know all about that. Yeah.
You can't just decide, you know what, I'm just going to stay and launch a business and do whatever I like. You needed like a salary job so that would be your sponsor for your visa. So you have to do that for a minimum of 5 years. In my case, I did a master's, so my master's didn't count. If you wanted to go through the master's route, that would be 10 years. So I had to start again from 2017 when I started the job in Nottingham. And then I decided to go to Cornwall because my friend told me it was very nice. And it turned out to be very nice.
Did it? Good. Okay.
Yeah, I said, why not? What have you got to lose? I'm single. We're single. Yeah, I've got lovely beaches, nice weather.
Yeah.
And it's just far from everywhere else. Cornwall and Devon, I've been there for the last 5 years now, going to the last 6 years. And yeah, I don't think I want to live anywhere else in the UK.
Right, good stuff.
Yeah, it's just that if I need to get to, like I was in the US for obviously Berkshire Hathaway.
That's the one thing I've written down that I want to talk to you about.
For me to get there, I had to like leave home so early because I didn't want to fly from Newquay to London because I'll need my car to do a few things in London. So I had to leave home, drive to London a few hours, maybe 4 hours, park my car, get on the flight. So it's just so far. If I needed to be in Newcastle for a friend's wedding, I had to sort of like drive to Newquay Airport, take a flight to come to Newcastle.
Right,
so it's far from everywhere, but it's also lovely. It's green. The people are nice, and I think I've been fortunate down here as well. So the internet helps me to make up the bit that I could have missed because you couldn't network. I couldn't talk to you if we didn't have sort of like the remote option.
Yeah, it's such a lovely part of the world, isn't it, down there?
I love it.
Yeah, my uncle used to live in Cornwall. He absolutely loved it. But
really, whereabouts?
Oh, right on the tip.
Penzance.
Penzance. There you go.
Penzance. That's the end. Yeah. You can't go if you go beyond Penzance and Land's End. You can't go any further without getting wet.
Yeah. He lived in Penzance, and he sadly passed away from he had chronic myeloid leukemia.
Sad.
But yeah, that was a good few years ago now.
Wow.
But yeah. So coming back to so do you still practice? There's a good question.
Yes, so I've got my practice license.
Right.
Though the last time I've been in a GP surgery was exactly 3 months ago.
Okay.
And before then, probably a few months. So I do dip in and dip out just because I want to keep that license.
Right.
You need a number of sessions per year. I think 20 sessions every year. 40 sessions actually. 40 in total year to be able to gain your annual appraisal. And my experience has been that sort of like I enjoy practicing medicine as long as I didn't feel caged. And then I go back, I sort of like come out with a lot of energy, enjoy the banter, and I'm not like particularly stressed because I can come and go. And some people will bust a vein thinking, "Oh, you doctor, why are you not working 5 days a week?" And I'm like, well, at some point I wasn't a doctor at all, so it's fine if you want to do it. Yeah, so it's just like we had a baby and I'm 3 weeks. I've been at home and just no agenda. I'm doing stuff, obviously, posting bits and bobs on LinkedIn and but So that sort of flexibility and freedom has always been the goal, not to buy a
Yeah.
Ferrari or Lamborghini.
Yeah.
So I've maintained my practice license, but I haven't got like a salary job or regular commitment or locum I've got to show up or
Yeah.
stuff like
That's a
that.
nice position to be in then.
I'm not complaining, Andrew, and
Mm.
I know that it enrages sometimes. I've read like comments where people say, "Oh, doctors, they don't show up in the GP surgery; they're out in a private practice somewhere." And I'm thinking, not all the doctors are out in a private practice, and they don't get paid if they don't show up. But
Yeah.
I think I'm very fortunate in that respect because being able to take a walk in the woods on a Monday morning, obviously after school run, or being able to decide I'm just going to take 2 weeks to work on this project or I
Mm.
want to develop this whole area. There was no way I would have been able to upload 150 videos on YouTube or in such a short period of time or have like 53 newsletters, 60 blogs. I mean, we've only started on YouTube in October.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just time being able to sort of go into topics I like prompt engineering or
Mm.
have conversations to people like you who obviously inspire us to say there's much more out there. Yeah, so
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
you
I'm very
use
fortunate.
well, you use the word fortunate, and I'm glad you used that word rather than the word lucky, because there's nothing lucky about you. You know you've made the decisions that
English is
have.
not my first language, so as a matter of fact, I'm supposed to write an English test tomorrow.
How is it?
I'm going to tell you about it later for whatever reason. After a master's and after all the stuff I do, I still need to write an English test. So what's the difference between fortunate and lucky?
Well, the lucky implies that something has appeared for you, whereas fortunate means that you understand that your position is different to others.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
so lucky would imply that you were given financial resources, which means that you don't need to go into work every day. What you've actually done is made decisions throughout your life that have provided you with additional income streams that mean that you are in a position where you don't have to go into work every day if you don't want to.
That
And that's
that
a
that
different thing. There's a big difference between being lucky and being
I'm being
fortunate.
fortunate. Yeah, I mean that's a good way to look at it. I just think about other stuff and think maybe I might have been unlucky and been born in a wealthy family,
Mm.
or maybe I might not have got like a scholarship to come to Nottingham, or maybe somebody might not have introduced Rich Dad Poor Dad to me, which led to me reading all sorts of stuff. Like you, I know you read quite widely, and I also have like I read all kinds of stuff, history, economics. I'm currently reading um Felix Dennick's book and
Mm.
also Adam Smith, like The World of Nations. So I read sort of like wide varied, and I thought, what if I couldn't read, right? So
Mm.
I think I will agree with you because most time people assume that if you're in a certain position, things dropped on your laps. And
Mm.
I've seen you because you share your pictures. We sort of like see the work you put in your projects and can upload. I bet you in 5 years' time, when you have much more cash flow, people are going to think, oh yeah, of course you're a doctor, you're a GP, and you might have inherited stuff. And
Yeah.
not forgetting that your last name is not particularly Grosvenor. I don't fall into that class, unfortunately. Yeah, I inherited other things like good common sense and
Yeah.
integrity.
But then Rich. So you're being very modest.
Thank you.
Things like if I hadn't been introduced to Rich Dad Poor Dad, there are millions of people that have read Rich Dad Poor Dad. There are millions of people that pay for training that never do anything with it, and it just becomes like I see. We both know there are things out there, training programs to property or business or crypto or not necessarily crypto or stocks and shares or whatever, and you can pay 10,000, 20,000 pounds for these things. Only
Yeah,
1 or 2% of those people will put the action in required to see the benefit of that education. So for the rest, it's
that's
just expensive entertainment. And lots of people read Rich Dad Poor Dad and never implement the teachings within it. But it's all there. It's there.
Yeah, I can't argue with that because I remember I didn't reach that poor dad. And I've been on a podcast where people ask me sort of like background and all that stuff. And my dad was sort of like that university educated. And I remember sort of like pleading and insisting that maybe you should have a read of this book because I was like 16. I didn't know, could I really apply these things? And I know my dad thought that these things are not applicable in Nigeria. And it's true, like you couldn't get a mortgage and all that, but there are some aspects that sort of like changed the way I think. And even when I came into the UK, I had to start figuring out the UK financial system. Where are the leverages? Where are sort of like the like doctors who sort of like pick up a credit card for 25% and they don't know this is like a bomb waiting to explode, or trust their finances to a random financial salesperson who identifies as an advisor. Yeah. So I think I agree with you in that regard that people, because when my dad read that book, he thought, well, this is not applicable. It's just someone just writing a book. And unfortunately, lots of people cash in with these whole courses and expensive entertainment. I've never really thought about it like that, but now when I think about it, I think it's really, really expensive mental junk food.
Yeah.
Because you see people who are property gurus and stock finance gurus, and their main source of income is from education rather than from what they're doing. So yeah, I mean, if their business is fine, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. A lot of people in the modern age, knowledge is quite an easy thing to get, but what can never be substituted is the effort that you need to put in once you've got that knowledge to make it work. And everybody seems to just want the quick fix. And that's why a lot of these courses get sold, because they get sold on financially free in 7 days, leave your job in a year, all this rubbish.
I mean, you've been doing this for a while now, so obviously you've built up to the point where you're financially free enough to be able to walk away from your job, or at least have the option to walk away from your job. So did it take you 7 days, Andrew?
It didn't even take 7 days to get a reply from a solicitor. It took like 3 months.
I know. I've just been through a mortgage of one of our properties, and I know it almost felt like trying to pull out a fingernail just to get a solicitor to do their job. Of which I was
painful at the moment. Yeah. It really is bad. But yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it's nice to have that dose of common sense, and unfortunately, people don't like to hear that. It's like trying to offer people like vegetables and fruits and a well-balanced diet over milkshake and sort of like fast food. You only fast. So I'm not saying people can't do this stuff in 1 year or 2 years, but chances are that most people will need to put in some time to build out. You need to build out a system or build out an asset, because you've got to own an asset. And just one trick or one hack, if you think about your business and what you do, you've got to learn copywriting. You're out there daily, and I'm thinking he's not even a content producer. He's actually in property and he's buying businesses, but you're out there producing content daily, legit content. So you have to learn copywriting. You have to learn copywriting. You have to learn sort of like networking, big deal. You have to raise finance, which is real estate. Everyone I know in real estate, including some of our partners, we're always raising finance because that's part of it, and so many other skills stacked on your training as a doctor that teaches you things like other skills like obviously empathy, being able to talk to people and all that stuff. So most people saying to someone that you're going to take 7 days and then transform everything, or someone looks at my stock portfolio, my investment strategies, I always say, no, you can't really learn it in a day. I don't even teach stuff like that because I usually think, well, I don't know your psychology or approach to money. Maybe when the market goes down and I'm excitedly jumping in and buying stuff, you begin to panic and you're selling stuff, or you get a letter from HMRC, brown letters. And I've just spoken to a doctor today, a consultant, and they panic and they get really worried and stressed, and sometimes these are things that muscles are developed over time, and that's the process of learning. And I don't know if it ever ends because I'm still learning.
Yeah, that is so insightful. The how people react to things they don't know until they're in the situation.
Exactly.
And then as you progress, I'm a big thing. One of the biggest things that I think is that it's not the things you achieve that really matter. It's the person that you become to achieve them. So I encounter things now which may have really knocked my confidence or demoralized me or really sent me into a tailspin a few years ago, but now it's just a daily occurrence. It's just normal.
You build the muscle.
You build the muscle. That's so true. And things like the stock market, if people are long and you have a correction and they're predominantly long, they sell off, you know. But
it's very strange.
A few times, then
I mean, I'm glad you said that because we've been in the opportunity of being courted or being approached by a few platforms that provide accounts for trade, investors and all that, and they want to sort of like do a deal. And I see that some of them give like practice accounts to practice stock trading, but you've been in the stock market yourself, like practicing with fake money. It's not quite the same because money is a charged issue. If you sort of like invest in your family's inheritance. So my little one's tiny inheritance, again, is not as big as the gross Venus. I don't have anything against them. But if you realize that this is sort of like you're depriving your children of what they're going to get, or you're gambling with their future, it's not quite the same. Or in my case, if you're investing, when I take a position, there's allocations I don't go beyond. So I don't go beyond like 10 to 15% of my entire portfolio. Now I've got a very concentrated portfolio. I'm never inside more than 6 or 10 positions at any single time. I didn't do this on purpose. I just looked back the last 19 years. I realized I've never actually been in more than 10 positions because of conviction. But if you were doing that and you were doing it with real money, the emotions are different compared to the stock trading account. So that's why I really appreciate what you said, that until you've been in that position, you felt it. And when you felt it and you're able to sort of like jump over that hoop, you develop the muscles, the right attitude, you realize like the world is not going to end, and you probably know how to react the next time things like that show up. As long as it is not the end, for instance, as long as it doesn't end your career or wipe you out, or sort of like, that's the way I look at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of, so you will know, but a lot of people listening, this might be new to them, but there is a well-known phrase within the stock market industry amongst professional traders, that retail traders, which is the common person on the street that starts to invest in the stock market, retail traders lose 90% of their funds within 90 days of trading. So 90% of retail traders lose 90% of their funds within the first 90 days of trading. So it's the 90-90-90 rule. And that's so common. But one of the biggest reasons for that is the amount of leverage. So if you're trading CFDs, and for those that aren't in the stock market, if you're doing your own trading, you can use something called contracts for difference, which essentially is the same as buying the stock, but you're buying a mirror of the stock, and it allows you to use what's called leverage. So if you want to go 10 times leveraged, so you could buy 10 times the amount of stock you could actually afford, and any slight increment is magnified 10 times. So potentially you could earn 10 times as much for a tiny 1% change, or you can lose it all. The losses are magnified 10 times. And people get so kind of hooked on the fact that they can leverage, and if Tesla shoots up 10%, they can make 100% in a day. But they get wiped out so quick.
I mean, I don't know what was it? Charlie Munger, who said smart men are often destroyed by only two things, and I think he said, Charlie Munger, he usually didn't care about being appropriate or whatever.
I want to know what the two things are.
I think he said either women or leverage.
Is that right?
Bless his soul. Yeah, I've late memory, Charlie Munger. He wasn't there this year in Omaha. But yeah, the thing is leverage. I'm sure your audience obviously understands leverage and all that stuff. But basically, debt, borrowing money.
Yeah.
And the more you borrow, the more like you're amplifying your risk of blowing up. I've got one of my favorite authors. I read everything he writes. Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I don't know if you've come across him. I think you're going to love him. He wrote a book called Food by Randomness. I think anybody who's sort of like trading or taking risk or business or whatever, even if you're just a surgeon, Food by Randomness by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He also wrote The Black Swan and a few other books. So if you see people like Tim Ferriss, Naval Ravikant, who's an angel investor, those are sort of like their gurus, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He doesn't maintain a social media presence or any of that stuff. He used to be a trader, then became a mathematician, and he's a philosopher.
Right.
And he talked about this whole risk thing, is to think about things in terms of blow up. So he was talking about massive banks taking major risk and making money for 20 years. Then every 20 years they will blow up and lose all the money they made in the last 20 years and a bit more. And he was saying that any decision you're making, you should make sure that it's not going to be the type that could lead to a blow up. For instance, if you're going to invest like 10% of for those who wanted to go into crypto and stuff or whatever risky stock, if you put in 10% and it didn't go all right, that would not be the end. You'll still be able to do stuff. And that's sort of like a bit of risk management. I mean, 10% could be quite high. But these are the way he thinks about it. And strangely enough, he described blow up as the equivalent for a trader. He said the equivalent is the equivalent of a doctor losing their practicing license.
Right.
And that's how he described blow up, because I was like, bye from the profession. You're not going to come back here, because if you're giving some money and you lose money, I mean, if you're a startup, I've got a few inbounds from startups now who are launching and they send us their pitch deck. If you're a startup and you lose money, but you've been explaining what's been happening and everything, you're more likely to get funding the next time. Even people who have lost their money might still. I've had someone on my podcast who had a startup that failed in 6 months, but it was a very good idea and all that stuff. They couldn't just raise money to hire more engineers. But if you're a fund manager and you make some silly mistakes, or you are sort of even not a fund manager, maybe you run a family office. Once you make some silly mistakes and you blow up spectacularly, nobody's going to give you any money to manage again, just like a doctor that loses their license.
No, it's
well,
right,
this is how I think about it.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And I'm going to look that up. Food by Randomness. Is that the book?
Yeah, Food by Randomness. I'm going to send it to you as well. Food by Randomness, The Black Swan, and he also wrote Skin in the Game. Skin in the Game is a fun. I think you're going to love the books, basically, because a lot of your thinking and philosophy is along those lines. So you want to be real and you have skin in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Not just some sort of random person on LinkedIn saying, I made $1 million in one day. This is how I did it.
Sign up here. Click the link below to get more. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me, speaking about stock markets, it's a perfect way to segue, yes, to segue into the Berkshire Hathaway. Was it the investor meeting?
Yeah, it was a shareholder meeting.
Right.
I obviously attend some investor calls just on the phone, but this was like the annual meeting where everyone comes in, and it got people from all over the place. And I think I met people from China, Hong Kong, and strangely enough, some of the people I remember meeting from the UK. Well, like I met this German hedge fund manager. He's an expatriate, so you get to meet like 85-year-old grandfathers who bought stocks for their grandchildren who are now teenagers, and you also meet like young people or younger people. I don't know where I fall in, maybe middle in age, who are just sort of like big fans, and we've come to these shareholder meetings that we could have all turned in virtually to attend. But
what's the atmosphere like? It can't just be everybody crams into a room and then it's over. It must be a busy about the place.
Andrew, it's crazy. I mean, do you like music? Have you been to Glastonbury? Yeah, you do, of course. Yeah. Have you been to Glastonbury?
I have, yes.
You've been to Glastonbury. So I describe a Berkshire Hathaway annual conference as Glastonbury for investors.
Right.
Because you see all the black man. I see some of the authors, I read their books, and I think these are brilliant fund managers. And I meet them one-on-one, we take pictures, we sign their books.
Wow.
But there's also the day before, there's sort of like a bazaar where there's shopping. You can come and buy. It's such a brilliant marketing move because all their portfolio companies come and set up stores. They sell like several hundreds of millions of stuff. Like their seeds, candy, chocolate. You can order a home from Berkshire.
Wow.
There are different portfolio companies set up, and people come shopping. They have a chat. How did you start? When did you start investing? And there are smaller meetings as well holding in Omaha, which are sort of like maybe European investors group, or maybe there might be sort of like Asian investors group. I think it's just fantastic. And to tell you the number of people that came in, I think there was between 30 to 40,000 people.
Wow. Wow.
And it cost me more, just for context, it cost me more to fly from Atlanta inside the US to Omaha than it cost me to fly from London to Atlanta. So it was cheaper to fly all the way from London to Atlanta.
Wow.
I think it was just over $1,000 just for that short flight because of the number of people who wanted to get in.
Oh, is that why? Because it was so busy.
Yeah, it's not, Omaha is not a busy place, but just for that weekend is like a festival.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds brilliant. So obviously Charlie's passed away, sadly.
I mean, it's sad, but part of why I thought I must go this year is because I mean, Warren Buffett is obviously still in very good health, but nobody knows when. Yeah, he is. He's like 93 or there 94, so nobody knows. I thought, well, I've got to do this. What's the point of having that time freedom if you can't make use of it? I don't have to apply for a leave now. I might have thought, I've got only 4 weeks or 6 weeks to leave. I'm not going to burn 1 week going off to a random shareholders meeting.
Yeah, and did Warren do because he normally goes through the account, so So
there was the Q&A, which is the part that gets televised, which is the popular ones where all the clips comes out. So there was the Q&A. You had Warren Buffett there, but there was also Ajit Jain and Greg Abel. These are his two lieutenants now. They are sort of like running bits and parts of obviously going to be the successors in the business. So before it was him and Charlie, but this time there was Warren and this chap. So the Q&A session is usually sort of questions people ask and give responses, and a lot of gems drop from there because you see the way they are thinking about their business, the way they are thinking about their acquisition, and that's where I found out that obviously they've shaped their position in Apple. So Apple is one of their biggest positions, and they still have a big position in Apple, but they've shaped, which is, again, Apple is one of the greatest investments Berkshire Hathaway made. But Apple CEO was right there, Tim Cook and all that. And
was he there as well, was he?
Yeah, he was. And he said he's glad there was even an investment in Apple in the first place. So that was the Q&A. That was the first session. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. And of course, there's the Berkshire Hathaway film that is played. It's never played online. It's only in that meeting, and it sort of traces their journey. You can see elements of how they wear, media appearances. It's just amazing. But after all that, then there's a serious business, closed door, and half of the people are not there. But actually, that's what I went for. It's also closed door. That's the annual meeting. That's where we sort of like vote on stuff like decisions, and there are a lot of like key decisions. And Berkshire Hathaway is one of the companies where the shareholders are very much in alignment with the management, compared to, let's say, a company like Disney. I don't know if I should be saying all my positions, but I know I have voted quite a few times against what the board wants to do in Disney.
Right.
But I'd never dream of it in Berkshire Hathaway because I'm seeing them as wise and so they know what they're doing, and it all sounds like common sense. But it might just be clever branding over the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean that is fascinating. And the Warren Buffett's book, The Snowball, is that his book?
Probably a book about him. Because he hasn't written one yet, so there's quite a few books about him. Yeah, The Snowball
must have been a biography then, not an autobiography.
Yeah, it's a biography.
Yeah, I read a book called The Snowball about him, Obviously, the snowball's about you start very small and slowly it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which is ultimately what happens if you do things correctly. And it was fascinating to learn about his wife, who was really a philanthropic. She was very keen on him setting up foundations, and she got heavily into giving his money away. And eventually he ended up having to agree.
Yeah. I know his wife was more focused on sort of like philanthropy. I don't know a lot about the wife. I know he had a wife, and then the wife eventually had to marry. The wife left or died, and then married the wife's friend or something like that.
Yeah.
But I know he gives out a lot of money, and he channels some of the money or a lot of it through Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
So again, he could have set up his own proper foundation, but sort of like this is what I need to do.
Yeah, in the Snowball, it talks about his wife. They lived apart for a long, long time.
That's correct.
They were effectively kind of divorced, but still married.
Exactly.
And he just let her manage this foundation fund, and she was heavily into it. And there's an awful lot of involvement with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and their foundation, and it seemed to be that because they've got the foundation in place already to do the good things with all this money, that they just pass it through them and let them be the conduit to.
Exactly, that's well. If they're already managing the money smartly, maybe he felt, why do I need to set up a new one and all that stuff?
Yeah.
It's just that sort of like practical common sense approach. That's something that you see in Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah.
They don't get involved in hype stuff or popular stuff just because everyone is buying it, and they just tend to have this common sense methodical approach, and they don't claim to be mathematical wizards, but you can clearly see that they're quite bright. Reading through all this annual reports and doing all the boring heavy lifting to then sit around and then every couple of years or maybe every year make a swing and go in quite heavy and buy like sort of a big chunk of a failing bank or a big chunk of a promising company that no one knew. I think that sensible practical approach that a lot of us admire. Obviously it's not very entertaining for most
it's not very entertaining, and it's almost impossible for other people, for the normal person, to emulate, because we don't have the financial resources to do that. So you might take positions in their companies that they are investing in, on the understanding that if Berkshire are in that company, it's likely to do all right, but you can't influence the performance of that company the same way that Berkshire can, because they effectively buy it to control it, don't they?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I mean, a lot of people, because part of what someone texted me, I had a friend, a doctor in New York, or I've got a few friends who are doctors in the US, and they knew I was around, and they're like, "Oh, what's the stock to buy?" I've never really made a buying decision or selling decision based on what Berkshire or anyone did, because that would
you might not do, but a lot of people do.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. That it's not the smartest thing to do, because once it's out in the public, it gets priced in.
Yeah.
So if you hear that Warren Buffett has bought something, like last time you were on my podcast, I said it's some level of influence investing, and that's true. A lot of people think, well, Warren Buffett will think is a smart thing to buy this, but by the time you go in, then it's already out in the news and it's already priced in. And if they got it at a very good deal, you probably are going to be getting at full price. Obviously, This is the way I think about it. And of course, before they make that trade themselves, they knew the thesis. So if you buy because they bought it, you've got to keep an eye to know when they sell it again, so you can sell it.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much. Yeah, absolutely. So I love the way you talk about this stuff. It's like you say, it is common sense, and it comes, I think this feeds in nicely to your MoneyWiseDoctor.com, which is one of the reasons I know you. So how did that start, and where are you up to with it, and what's its mission?
Yeah, fantastic, Andrew. Yeah, so Moneywise Doctor.com. I mean, it's sort of like after I've left my side job, I was sort of like had all this time and thinking I'm going to start something here. AI was all new, and I thought I'm just going to build out sort of like something because I was going deep into prompt engineering, and I thought I first acquired like ChatGPT Doctor.ai, so that's one of my properties, my online properties. I've got about 53 of those domains.
Mm.
Some of them are public, some of them are not. And at some point, I realized I look back my life in the last, I'll say 15 to 20 years, one thread has always been there. It's sort of like colleagues, friends, family calling me to say, look, I want to go into this thing. Is it a good idea? Right from medical school, I was already speaking in seminars. I was on TV and talking about sort of like investing, and you have like sort of consultants or CEOs of companies sit in my seminars, and I sometimes wonder why are they sitting in this seminar, because they're obviously far wealthy and already figured out life. And I was 22 and trying to figure out stuff. And my stockbroker himself would sort of work with me in my seminar, put things together. So I saw one trend that had always been there was that doctors and healthcare professionals and the rest of the population, particularly doctors and healthcare professionals, don't tend to be super smart when it comes to things like money.
Mm.
I'm not saying doctors are not smart. Doctors are smart, but when it comes to finances,
Mm-hmm.
for some reasons, either because we work long hours, or we're busy, or we get disposable income, or you just leave medical school and you land a job sometimes without having to do quite a lot of hustling or trying to put together your CV. You know, you're going to get a
Mm-hmm.
job most times. So for some reason, and also because being in school all this period, a lot of doctors and healthcare professionals tend to be sort of like on the back foot when it comes to things like finances, investing, savings. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that actually, when you talk to people in financial industries, there are people that particularly target doctors and healthcare professionals. One, because they've got disposable income, and two, because of that knowledge gap. Because of
Mm-hmm.
that knowledge gap, I'll give you a quick example. You work with all sorts of people. If you work with a plumber or a bricklayer, somebody who is a builder and he's a multi-millionaire, he's definitely got there. Obviously, there's been hard work on both sides and they've been fortunate. But he will know something about the numbers. He will know
Mm-hmm.
something about managing a team, leading a team. But I know doctors who are millionaires, maybe they're highly specialized neurosurgeons and they get paid a very high salary and they don't know how to read the cash flow statement. They might not really know what is the effective interest rate they're paying or they're
Mm-hmm.
being charged in something and all that. So that creates sort of like a knowledge gap.
Mm.
So, and then there's me that's sort of like in those two areas, and I'm spending so much time on calls with people calling me about the mortgage and life insurance, investing, and all that, to a point that it was fine when I was single, but it gets to a point where I'm married now. It's taking away time from the family, and my wife is just wondering why are you spending all this time on the phone with all these people and all that. We struck a compromise. I was going to set up a website and a blog, and if someone asked me a question, I'll go and answer it there so that in the future, if someone wanted something similar, they could go with it there.
Yeah.
So that was the origin of
Right.
Moneywise
Okay.
Doctor. But I had time on my hands. So what did I do? I decided to start writing more stuff,
Right.
more questions. The more questions you answer, the more inquiries you got. And this was mainly from doctors, dentists, nurses, mainly healthcare professionals. And what happens when you say a question to someone and somebody else comes and says, "Can you explain this thing to me?" And say, "Yeah, I understand it, but I think if you want to really understand it properly, you should go with this blog or chat with this person." But I couldn't speak to everyone who wanted a piece of my time. I mean, our mail goes out now to almost 2,000 doctors every week. And I thought, at that early stage, it was just like maybe 20s or 30s of people who contacted. And even at that point, there was a lot. So we said, why don't we build a proper blog out of this? Given my previous experience of blogging and search engine optimization and all that online stuff, and so I started a blog. When I saw that I was getting quite a bit of engagement, we built in a mailing list, because without a mailing list, you just sort of like don't really know who are
Mm.
your real readers. And then from there, we started getting requests to sort of speak in events. And after
Mm.
being on a couple of podcasts, so this was around, we started around February, ending March of last year.
Right.
And after speaking in quite a few events, conferences, we got to the point where I said, video would be nice, and people will send me a link to a video, and yeah, so this guy said this, but it sounds different because he doesn't seem to understand that pensions are different. You know, doctors' finances are different. NHS pension is not the same. You've got defined benefit. People, YouTubers talk about defined contribution type of pension, and someone said, "Would you ever do videos?" I really hate to do videos because I could write anytime in my boxers in the dark. But I thought, let me do a video, a couple of videos, set up a YouTube channel, and I think you were one of my early guests. And
is that why I was the most views, because I was the first?
I don't think so, actually, because there has been others, and there were videos before. Yes, actually, your video, people still send me messages, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have you back. But your story was very engaging, but it resonated with a lot of people. It was very raw, it was very real. And yeah, so
I'm coming back. Don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to hear what you've been up to. But that's how we've gone on this journey. None of it was, running like, oh, we're just going to set up a blog. There's a bit of planning in it. There's a bit of strategy. Obviously, we do our keyword optimization, search engine optimization. We built up a mailing list. We've got to write engaging copy. Like our last newsletter, we had like 58.9, almost 60% open rate.
Wow.
And the click-through rate was 10 times our usual. I get like almost 6% click-through rate, and that's quite a bit of a number, but that tells you are onto something. And then the question will be, how do you monetize this? So I'm not very, very comfortable with the whole idea of selling information, because information is everywhere. And of course, you might end up having a high-end course for people who want to go into fundamental analysis and all that. But we thought about ways to monetize, and realized, well, there are a few ways we could monetize. We could do affiliates, you could do partnerships, and then obviously if someone down the line now wanted a one-on-one consultation, which wasn't an offer at the beginning, we had people request this. And when you said, yeah, I haven't got that offer, I'm not available, and someone offered to pay, and they throw out a number. So that opened another stream of income, which is not one of the ones we advertise, because once I advertised it and I got booked out for 4 months.
Well, I think I love it. Putting one foot in front of the other, just following your nose, smell what's working, and just keep going.
Exactly. I mean, it's not as exciting as going out and building and buying hotels and refurbishing them and renovating them, because it's all in front of a computer and all that. And every now and then you go out and speak in a live audience, and I've done a lot of remote audiences as well. But it's nice to sort of like see the progression, like where it started, and also I still look at it like, well, I don't know. Is it a business, a hobby? It's great. Maybe there's some income in it, but like when I'm 90, if I get to 90, I'll probably be writing the newsletter anyway. Because the way I approach it is that I've got like circle of friends who always ask me stuff. What's happening? If I'm always with my friends, the thing is like, what should we do? There's been some new HMRC rules. Andy, what do you think? There's this IRO 35 limited company. Andy, what do you think? So the way I look at it is that those circle of friends, I'm writing to them. And I have them in mind that, oh, look, I've got to write this thing in a level that they don't understand leverage, they don't understand debt, asset ratios, but you write it in a way. That's why sometimes it might be so stepped down, because you think, oh, if I went into technicalities, you might not be able to explain some things in it. Yeah, so that's why I think maybe when I'm 90, and it sounds sad that at 90 I'll probably still be writing or whatever form of communication to a few thousands of friends around the world.
It's not sad. It's if you find something that you like doing, then that's you've got to keep doing something.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I really do think, I think you're absolutely right that medics and healthcare workers in general are very financially I don't know, I don't want to say illiterate, but they are definitely on the back foot. It's just the truth.
Back foot is a nice way to put it.
It is. As doctors and medics and nurses, every other type of healthcare professional, we are all consumed with our patients and doing the job. Things that other people experience throughout their life, like monetary things or financial education that you don't know that you're learning, but you come into it when you're a plumber and you've got to manage your own books or whatever it is, that it completely misses us. And when you become a partner in a practice, you'll find
you were a partner,
but when you're a partner, if there's a partnership of 4, if there's one of you that is interested in what the accounts are doing, it's a miracle, because I would say maybe 1 in 10 are interested, if that. So in my last partnership, there was at one point there were 7 of us, and there was just me that actually wanted to know what was happening in the accounts. So most doctors and most healthcare workers are too busy concentrating on something else, their patients, because that's what drives them, rather than to understand anything about the financial world. And that's why what you're doing in that niche area, because medics' financial situation and pensions, etc., are completely different to anybody else's, apart from government workers, politicians, and councillors. They all have a similar thing. So if you're not into that market, then that might be another little market for you. But they're all the same. So
absolutely. Maybe if you wanted to go into that market for politicians, probably sell them some insurance, some political career insurance. Like, you don't know if we're going to lose the election. Maybe buy insurance for when you lose the election. But I understand medics, because I've been a medic and I live in that world, and I know what people are worried about, where they need help. So that's part of why, for instance, you make a video about NHS pension and it gets like a few thousand views, because that's sort of like a niche area compared to pension in general. And you said health. I think it wasn't a wrong word, because financial health is part of health. So sort of like you get people who burn out. Like, a lot of people talk about burnout these days, but something that fails to get mentioned is that financial sort of situation contributes to burnout, because if you decide to take a couple of weeks, because if you think things are coming to a head, but you think about, and this is not something I'm imagining, it's sort of like, I've met a lot of doctors who are earning over 100K, and they sort of like get stuck, and they can't take a few weeks off because of the financial fallout. So these are all sort of things to look at. You mentioned GP partners. We did a 20 GP partner session. It was organized by a GP partner, so that we looked at tax and sort of like situation, and you find out that most of them, even those who've been partners for many years, didn't really even know how the books worked, which is very strange, because it's a business, right? And yesterday I had a consultation with a GP partner as well. So more people are beginning to take a little bit more interest, just because of the way things are going. Just realize you got to really become your own chief financial officer, basically, and that doesn't mean you've got to know everything, but you need to know enough to know when the wood is being pulled over your eyes, or when you need to make a different decision in a different direction, and not just swallow everything that is recommended by the big medical associations or royal colleges
and their associated financial advisors
and associated financial advisors, who are basically restricted financial salespeople.
But they follow their advice blindly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That whole financial advice kind of sector is just criminal, if you ask me.
Let's say
a little financial advice in there.
Let's say mucky. Okay,
yeah. Good.
I'm learning English. Right. I mean, the good thing is we know, but not everyone knows these things. When it comes to financial advisors, there are independent. I know this because we get a lot of reach out from financial advisors who want to come on our platform, and we've had to say a lot of no's. There are independent financial advisors who, some of them are sort of like specialists, they deal with doctors, but they are independent. Then there's the restricted financial advisors. Obviously, the restricted financial advisors, they work in a big organization, a brand name organization, they get paid a salary, and they are obviously most of the ones that we see all over the place, and they're being advocated by medical associations and different royal colleges. And then there's the institutional, like bank financial advisors. Now, if I were to make a choice, I always tend to go with the independent ones, whether it's my mortgage or life insurance or investment advice. A lot of times there's very little investment advice. I've not had to consult an advisor for investment all these years because I know that 99% of the sort of like investment managers underperform the index fund anyway. They haven't got better results. But sometimes you might need an advice. For instance, you have a new baby or you had two new babies and you're thinking, how do I allocate my funds to make sure that there's funds for college, or you want to do some trust or something that is very specific. In that instance, you might need a financial advisor. But I tend to prefer to go with an independent advisor basically because of the conflict of interest. The restricted financial advisor can only offer me within a panel. They can only offer me stuff within a number. Maybe they've got like 10 or 15 products. That's all they can offer me compared to an independent advisor that even if they haven't got like all the, even if they haven't got a big brand name, they can check the whole market. They is in their interest. They haven't got any extra interest to recommend me something different. But even if you have the most trustworthy financial advisor, even if it's your dad or your father or your brother or someone, it still pays to understand what you're doing and sort of like, I'm not saying take everything with a cup of salt, but maybe a pinch wouldn't hurt. Understand what's going on, what they're doing, and understand what your interests are to be able to make sure that you're not just being led down to be slaughtered by being sold nonsense financial products that don't make a difference in your life.
I think a lot of it is the thing that bugs me about it is there's a couple of things really. A lot of the financial advisors are just on a salary and they don't have any assets behind them. They haven't really got any. They've not really achieved anything that should put them in a position to offer you advice on how to make something from your money. They've been trained, that's fine. But then they never really put across any sort of education about risk and risk tolerance. So I speak to lots of property people who try and raise finance, which, as you know, I do quite a lot of. And they always say to me that they're people that are approaching them for investment, they'll go away and talk to their financial advisor about it. Now, their financial advisor has absolutely no knowledge or ability to educate them on whether that particular independent business is worth putting their money into, because all they will say is it's much more risky than the 2% annualized returns you can get if you go with this, And of course, people think, oh, risk, I'll run away from it and I'll put it into whatever the financial advisor says, because they follow the advice blindly. They don't say, well, why don't you think about a proportion of your funds that you could afford to lose if you don't think that this particular person is that credible, or the returns are too good to be true, or whatever. They don't have that discussion. It's a blanket no, steer you back into what I can sell you.
Yeah, exactly, because there's sort of like incentives here, isn't it? Like a lot of times, if we talk about allocation, if you were to put in some money here, and remember what I said about 10%, 20% blow up, and let's just say corner plot, and just in a general example, let's just say corner plot wasn't legit. Obviously, we know you're very legit, and you put in 10% or 20%, it blows up. Then the other side of it is that what if we were to get 10% returns or 20% returns over the 2% you're going to get? That's risk and reward comparison. And then the other side of it is sort of like leaving my stuff for 2% annually. What about inflation? How much am I losing to inflation? Which is, people don't know, inflation is like a mother of money, basically. And then also there's the other bit that most people don't talk about. A lot of financial advisors don't, especially those that claim it's all free. They don't tend to tell you they're going to take a percentage of your money. I mean, I've had people really dumbfounded when they look through their numbers and saw their retirement. And this I find very commonly with restricted financial advisors who come in and say, oh, it's all free, it's fine. And then there's a fine print that when you want to retire and yank off if you want to take your money, you're going to yank off 2%, 3%. And I'm thinking, taking off that 2%, 3%, if you think about the compounded value, that could have even been enough to maybe rent one of your luxurious houses for a month or two, or even to go for a fancy holiday, Yeah, but again, it goes back to what we discussed. When money meets experience, the experience gets the money, and the money gets the experience. So a doctor working really hard, knows anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and all that good stuff, but has money because obviously doctors are not super wealthy. But one of my posts on LinkedIn last week, I was like, if you're earning 65,000, which most people wouldn't consider as well, some people consider it as more money, some people consider it not a lot of money. But if you earn 65,000, which is what a registrar, even sort of like a GP not working full time might earn, that puts in 10% of the highest earners. And if you end above 100,000, that already puts in maybe 2%, and above 180,000 puts in 1%. Now, let's say you are a surgeon or you're a GP, a consultant, and you're earning, let's say, 100,000, because obviously you've been training for many years, you're now working, you don't have to justify earning this income, you're providing that much value. And then you meet experience, you've got money, you meet experience, a restricted financial advisor who tells you, you don't have to do anything. Just pack all your money with me. Just tell me your risk appetite. And most people say, my risk appetite is medium. What is medium? It means they probably will take your money and put like 30% in bonds or 70% in stocks. So depending on your age, do one of those target date funds, which is fine. And then charge you a nice 2%, 3%, and sometimes some other hidden fees for the pleasure of doing that. Now, so why don't you just go and buy an index fund anyway? Just buy the whole market and just pay the platform fee.
Or an ETF.
So just like in real estate, you've got a lot of your real estate gurus and people who are out there. Unfortunately, in the financial world, there's also a lot of financial sales people who are being endorsed by big colleges, and they're being called like financial education and all that. And unfortunately, sometimes there's some pecuniary, a big word, there's some money benefits, financial benefits that go both ways. And
yeah, there certainly is. Yeah, and they get commission, they get kickbacks if they send you into a particular fund. Then they get a payment from that fund for you going there, even though it's free to you. There's all sorts of murky is a good word for it.
Murky. I think this is why we decided exclusively that if you're going to have partners, it to be independent financial advisors. At least if they were to charge you a fee, I've had a meeting at some point with this was before I started Moneywise Doctor, and I was looking at trust and properties and putting your stuff in the right ABC share type of company, and they had quite a big bill. But there was this team, there was a lawyer, and there was a tax expert and an advisor and all that. And there was a big upfront bill, and I had to sort of like get my accountant, whom I paid for an hour to join the meeting to understand some of the numbers and all that. And that upfront fee, I thought would save me a certain amount of money, but it wasn't like a hidden fee somewhere, like it's free, don't worry, we're just going to slot in a 2%, that might run into hundreds of thousands when you actually retire. Yeah, so that's why we do what we do. We try to sort of, I wouldn't say that I'm the most popular among all the restricted financial advisors.
No, I'm sure you're not. And if I put my head on any of the GP finance or doctor finance Facebook groups and dare to challenge the financial advisors, they all gang up and start shooting you down. but that's for another post.
That's a different discussion altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. We could go on for a long time, couldn't we? So if anybody is listening or watching this and wants to find you, wants to subscribe to your newsletter or your blogs, where can people catch you?
So it's moneywisedoctor.com/subscribe. So if you just go to Moneywise Doctor, it's all spelled together, moneywisedoctor.com/subscribe, you'll be able to get our weekly newsletter. It's all free. And then, so you can get in your inbox if you actually read your mails.
And I'll put a link to your podcast in the blurb as well.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're doing now, we're giving out this sort of like a financial health quiz for doctors to say, I think a good place to start, because most doctors don't know what they don't know. They don't, for instance, life insurance, income protection, critical health. Some people go and buy all three. Sometimes they don't really need all that stuff at that point. Maybe they might not have any dependents and they just need an income protection, or they might not have a large enough budget so they can buy a health life insurance policy and an income protection. So sometimes they're sort of like in debt. They don't know. Sometimes they're not investing at all. Like you gave me your own journey of sort of like having consumer debt before you started building assets. So what we've done is we've put together a survey and we've had a few doctors go through that. I think over 350 doctors now.
Wow.
Out of our entire mailing list, which is now in thousands. And that survey is sort of like a financial health check, like a quiz you can do within a few minutes, basically, to check which areas you might need to adjust. Because we thought, well, what's the point? Someone joins my mailing list this weekend and I'm writing about ISAs or limited companies. They might be missing out some blind spots. So what we've done is that when people join that mailing list, that's among the first thing they get in the first couple of mails to say, take this quiz, figure out what you need to fix, figure out whatever risk factors you're sort of walking around as a doctor without knowing. And we found that people have found it really useful. I'll get like lots of testimonials from people who say, I wasn't even thinking about this, but now I've had to do something about it before it blows up in my face.
Brilliant. Wonderful. So, yeah. So if anybody's listening and wants to get in touch with Ndee, then get in touch on that link. It'll all be in the blurb below. But I think we've jabbered on for well over an hour now, mate. So I think we'll end this one here, and we might have to do an episode 2 on here as well.
It's much fun. I'll say it's good preparation for my English exam tomorrow.
With words like pecuniary.
Conflict of interest.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, Andrew.
Yeah, likewise, mate. It's been really good. Thank you very much for your time, and I can't wait for episode 2.
Cheers.